Welcome to the Daily Plunge. We're working our way through the Epistle to the Romans, chapter 11, verses 1 through 12. Now, starts off, question, did God reject the people of the first covenant? Did God reject the Jewish people? And Paul is clear, no. God does not break his promise. If God makes a promise, how long is it good for? Forever, right? And God did not abandon his chosen people. Even though there were times when they thought so, even when it might look like it, God is with them at their mountain heights and their deepest valleys. When God's people rejected him, tore down his altars, killed his prophets, the Lord said to the prophet Elijah, I have reserved a remnant for myself. And that remnant was chosen not based on their works, but on God's grace. And so he says that, if grace can be based on works, if grace can be based on what we can do on our own, well, then it's not grace, it's not mercy. And, as it goes on in verse 7, what they sought, which was the promise that was given to Abraham, to Moses and David, it was not obtained, right? Even though they sought it earnestly, they did not obtain it. Now, the elect among them did, and some Jews came to faith in Jesus Christ. But why didn't everyone? Verse 8, because God gave them a spirit of stupor. In other words, God gave them a spirit of ignorance, of rebellion, of sort of an arrogance of thinking they know best, so that they have blind eyes and deaf ears, and so that their table became a snare and a trap. The very thing of the temple, which was a gift to them from God, which was meant to point towards the Messiah, they get fixated on just that. And so their eyes are darker and they cannot see. So the thing is to understand is, did they stumble in a fall that they cannot recover? No, because they're never beyond the reach of God's mercy and grace. They're not beyond what God can do. You see, salvation is out of our hands. Salvation is out of our efforts and our will. It is based on God, upon God, God alone. Because God is the Lord Almighty, mighty in all things, which means that it is absolutely necessary that salvation be in his hands. What God wills, what God's purpose, is not up for negotiation. It's not up for a vote. It's not up to a poll, whether we want it or not. It is necessary. And what God wills is necessary. And so God wills our salvation. He predestines us for salvation. And don't get caught up in thinking whether you're predestined to damnation or predestined to the gospel. As Luther says, we are all predestined for the gospel as we hear the word. And let's focus not on whether we're good enough for not to be damned. Let's focus instead about how bad we are that we want to be predestined for Christ and his suffering for our sin. So it's good news that our salvation is beyond our hands, but not beyond God's reach, because we're too weak, we're too uncertain, and quite honestly, we're a little too devious, because if it depended upon us, no one would be saved. Think about it, because the devil, who is wily and who is destructive, would overpower us all. But God is dependable. God's will, God's predestination will not fail. God's salvation for you will not fail. And so we can have hope in spite of our sin. Amen.